Friends, the Teeth Matter website has been updated. Go to teethmatterpod.com to learn a little bit more about me, but also get access to all the things I use to make my life a little bit easier. Whether it has to do with nutrition or sleep, you can find it there at the Teeth Matter store. Go check it out. Okay, one last thing before we dive into the episode. I found out that 77% of those who listen or watch the episode don't actually follow the podcast, which means I need you to go to your Apple Podcast or your Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from and press that subscribe button. Make sure to follow so you can stay up to date with the latest releases. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teeth Matter, the podcast where we talk about the highs, the lows, the truths about what it means to have a career in dentistry. I'm your host, Ellie Halabian, DDS, and today we have Alan Withall. He is a representative for Henry Schein, and he helps practices grow from 0 to 100. So I'm excited to talk to him about what it's like to help other dentists grow in the profession. Alan, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ellie.
So Alan, tell us a little bit about your role at Henry Schein and how you got there.
So thanks again for having me. By title, I am a senior sales consultant. I moved out to New Jersey and the New York area about 12 years ago to work for Henry Schein. So, moved out from 12 acres of land to the concrete jungle and thought to myself, how the heck am I going to make it in this business? And 23, 24 years old, started making friends with younger dentists that were associates at practices. So kind of what we're going to be talking about today is just so fitting for all those dentists, who are associates wondering what next steps to take. Mm-hmm. So I started asking them what their 3 to 5 year plan was. And basically every one of them said, I want to be a practice owner. And when I asked them what they knew about that, all of them just gave a resounding, I don't know anything. And when they asked me what I knew, I unfortunately had to say I didn't know anything either. So, partnered with a few companies like Bank of America, a marketing company and lease negotiating company at the time, and formed what I call today the FYI Study Club. So we have meetings once to twice a year in the city, and it's really focused on how to do a practice startup as well as make existing practices more productive. So, how I help dentists today, I walk them through their vision on day one. Hey, Alan, what's it take to do a dental practice startup? All the way through every single introduction for what they need to get it done and selling them their equipment and merchandise and opening their practice.
You've worked in the industry for many years. And as you said, you have a role that's very invested in the field. And you do a bunch of different things in terms of guiding dentists to where they need to be. You're like the number one sales rep at Henry Schein. And like you said, you're on the front lines with these dentists every day. So what is it that you wish more dentists understood about your role and how it could impact their long-term success?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of blows people away is that the services that I provide are complementary to what I look for in the relationship. So, there are a lot of consultants out there that charge anywhere between $50,000 to $75,000 for what I offer complimentary just in return for their merchandise and equipment business. So at the end of the day, they have to buy it from somebody. And at no additional premium, I just provide the exact services complimentary.
Wait, let me get this straight. You're providing from soup to nuts, everything in between from, organizing your practice, maybe the layout of the practice and whatnot. And you're not expecting anything as long as they just buy from you. And there's no cap on how much they buy.
There isn't even a contract that I make them sign to do that work with me. It's just an understanding that if they see the value in what me and my team are providing to them, that they will be good enough to buy that merchandise and equipment from me. So let me be very clear that the people that I introduce them to, like lease negotiators, they will have to pay a fee for that, but it is also very competitive to what else they might find using a run-of-the-mill attorney. again, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I believe the people that I've scooped up to be a part of my team are the best and most competitive in the business. So, and they're dental specific.
Right. That's actually an amazing asset to have, because you've built these relationships with people who are in it providing different services, and you're basically tailoring and personalizing the needs of the practice owner, which is amazing.
Every single time. And I appreciate you saying that. It's very seldom do I get someone who, doesn't buy the merchandise and equipment from me in the end. But, not every scenario is perfect. But, as you recognized in the beginning, I've become the number one rep for Henry Schein globally 4 years ago. And then I was number two, and then maybe number three, and then number two again. But, nonetheless, I feel like I'm doing something right in providing this value that no one else can match. It's just putting the work in early, building these relationships, and then, having that last the next 30 years of both of our careers. So it's unique to be able to grow with these business owners and live vicariously through their success. And the more successful they are, the more successful I am.
Can I ask, is this commission based?
Only the equipment and merchandise that they buy. I do not have a quote unquote, salary from my company. I strictly only make my money off the equipment, merchandise, or, if there are business solutions that they sign up for through Henry Schein, that is also how I would get paid.
I only ask that because it just shows that you're investing in personal relationships and professional relationships, and with the intention of having a long-term relationship, right? A long-term partnership. Now, when you mentioned like all of these personalized adjustments that you make for each dentist, now, what does this relationship look like? How often, how much time are you spending with these dentists? How often do you visit these dentists? I'm curious to know what that looks like.
Totally. So even taking a bit of a step back, it's funny. I met with this financial planner who worked with one of the startups that I did. And in early conversations, this doctor wanted me to meet with his financial planner to see if we were a good fit in working together. And when I said that the services that I provided were complementary, that person actually asked me if I could, at the very least, charge like $10,000 to show that I was committed. I'm like, wait a second. You're a financial planner asking me to charge your client to show I'm committed. Like, I'm committed. I've done like hundreds of these startups. Like, I'm not going to try, nor can I charge for it with my contract with my company. So, what does my work look like working with these clients from day one until the end? I facilitate every single introduction from, the bank to the broker to the lease negotiator, their attorney for employment contracts, their CPA to do their business formation, bidding out for the contractors, the architects, maybe a designer, cabinet company introductions, literally soup to nuts, everything through the process. And, there will be times where the doctor's working with each of these individuals directly. And then I ask that they come back to me with the conversations to tell me kind of what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's quite honestly difficult to keep tabs on everything, every project, every step of the way. So the involvement from the doctor's end is really just keeping me in the loop when it's appropriate. Or say someone's not living up to their end of their job, then I might need to, really come in there and light a fire under someone. But, I would say for the majority of my projects, I'm still working with them, some 10 years plus later. And I think that retaining them as clients and friends hopefully shows a lot as well.
That's incredible. If a dentist reaches out to you about building or improving their practice, what's the first step in guiding them through that process?
Sure. So I actually have a presentation that I give. It's about an hour-long PowerPoint, which, several times I've had doctors be like, Alan, I I read 4 to 5 books, before reaching out to you. And I wish you could have saved me the days of reading and, just you summed everything up for me in an hour. And it's as simple as this timeline that shows, vision to completion of expectations for working with me and my team. And then I also break down a series of conversations, something like, how many operatories do you see yourself building out for? Let's talk about what those construction costs and equipment costs will look like to make sure that we are staying within budget of what the bank is going to give you, which, these days can actually, certain banks have now raised their limits because construction has gotten so high. But in the past, it was anywhere between $750 and $850. But, keeping a doctor within budget to try and not overextend themselves is really my goal. So. Right.
You mentioned basically building something from scratch. So construction and that essentially, in my mind, my mind goes straight to startup companies or startup dental practices. Do you work with acquisitions also?
I do work with acquisitions also. Henry Schein specifically has a company called Professional Practice Transitions. And so we have a whole slew of practices for sale, transitional offices. I will say, I don't want to poo-poo acquisitions too much, but you may have seen my comments here or there on people's walls, on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I'm not the biggest fan of acquisition just because the ones that are worth buying these days typically are being scooped up by larger organizations, DSOs, private equity, and not a lot of dentists want to stay on and work these days too. The other end of it is, I think we're about the same age, younger dentists these days don't want to come into a dumpy old practice that isn't updated. The chairs are 30 years old and have to be replaced. So I don't want to turn anyone off of acquisitions. I love the idea of residual income from day one. That's really the attractive thing. But then try and reface this office while it's open. It's a very difficult task. So sorry, to answer you directly, yes, of course I help with acquisitions. I just, when you weigh the pros and cons for an acquisition, the cons definitely are in my opinion, much higher.
Yeah, don't be sorry. I mean, everyone has a different opinion on this. I've spoken to people who really rather, pass off their practice to another dentist because of, quality of care and keeping that kind of quality, continuing that quality of care. But then again, like you said, it's nice to come into a practice and have that residual income. And in other times, it's nice to start something from scratch because you get to build your vision, and no one can tell you how to do that, right? So
well, here's another interesting thing, right? And this just happened with a friend. I'll leave it unnamed, but there's situations where you're an associate at a practice and they say, I want to sell you this practice. Okay. That all sounds great because you're the one who's generally producing more for the office in this case, if you've been there long enough. Right.
Right.
But without a first right of refusal for the purchase, you're not left with much. You have to have a contract in place when it comes time for the acquisition. And even then, when you have first right of refusal, that's only as good as giving or matching the highest offer, generally. So if a DSO comes in and offers 100+% of the number, the bank won't give you that 100+%. They'll only give you 70 to 80% of the practice's value. So go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I have to interrupt because
okay.
This is a silly question, but what is right of refusal?
First right of refusal would be like, so you get the option to match the price.
Okay.
So, nothing is guaranteed in that case. And that's usually what any attorney will recommend a selling dentist to give their associate, because why would you not take the best offer unless your heart is burning and saying, I want the best care for my patients after the fact, but oh man, my retirement means more to me. So when you're in that situation, there aren't many people who have that good heart, and they'll take the money. And that's the problem what dentists are facing today. And that's why I see such a surplus in startups. I just have to say, it's some dentists may view this opinion as, well, you're just telling me that so you can sell me new equipment. And believe me, when you buy the existing practice, you'll probably be buying more equipment from me than you would with a startup. So either way, I get your equipment.
Right. You mentioned banks buying at someone buying at 100%. Is that 100% of collections or production? Usually,
it depends on how the deal is arranged. But these days it's all on EBITDA. I don't know the exact earnings before interest,
taxes, depreciation.
Yeah. I'm not as well versed, honestly, in the acquisition buying power and what determines what. Usually when it comes to acquisitions, I personally will introduce my doctors to a great CPA and a great attorney to take over. I will not get involved from a liability standpoint, even if it's a doctor-to-doctor deal.
Yeah.
Attorney and CPA, let them take over.
Got it. So, over your 10, 12 years at Henry Schein and doing what you do, what are the top 3 most common mistakes you'll see a dentist make when they build?
I wouldn't call it a mistake at all, but in a recent project that I'm working on, I was just introduced to an orthodontist recently, and she was referred to me by a friend, and that friend decided to work with a consultant, and they're paying $50,000 plus for this service. They both have the same boss, and that boss actually said it was a dumb move for that other dentist to sign up with the consultant, because when you're working with a good team, and I'll selfishly say Henry Schein, when you work with a team like Henry Schein, we have the systems and services in place to not have to have you sign up with one of those consultants and spend that money. Marketing is so crucial. I know you did an interview a bit ago where someone actually said that you should spend $0 on marketing. I hope and think that it wasn't so direct to say that you shouldn't spend $0 on marketing, but I couldn't disagree more, because you need around $60,000 to $70,000 spend your first year for marketing. The national average says that you should spend anywhere between 6 to 8% of your total production on marketing. And most dentists aim to have $1 million of production their first year. Okay. So if you take the lowest number of 6%, that's $60,000 annual spend, about $5,000 a month. Getting through a project, most of your colleagues would say that they're only able to afford anywhere between $2,500 and $3,500 a month. It's not enough, especially in a market like New Jersey or New York or other major cities. So, when you sign on with one of these consultants for $50,000 to $70,000, what money does that leave you to spend on marketing? And that's really where you need your money as a startup. So that's honestly mistake number 1 is getting your priorities in order and just making sure you have the funding to properly market your practice.
What does properly marketing your practice look like? Where should, of that $5,000 a month, let's say, where should that go?
Sure. Honestly, sometimes even I think that making sure that your practice is visible to the public is really important. So having a retail space is obviously more costly. The bank is going to dictate how much you can spend on rent monthly, well, annually, broken down monthly. And so, if a retail space costs a bit more, I always say to shave some of that off of your marketing budget, because being visible is a marketing expense, in my opinion. So that would be my first spot that I would aim for, is location and visibility. And from there, look, I'm not a marketing expert by any means. I know that $0 is not the mark you should be going for. Yes, you should absolutely be doing Instagram, Facebook, any social networks that are free marketing for you. But AI is huge with Google now. It's like a newer thing that got launched over the last 2 years. Google Ads, search engine optimization, search engine marketing, just making sure that you get in touch with a marketing company, interview a few of them, and get the right expectations from day one, because they can even help you with creating that vision and developing that brand before you even build the practice.
Mm-hmm. I have to even say, like, marketing is not just publishing content. It's also, brand logo, for example, your office name. These are things that are going to be lasting images and lasting titles. So you really have to put some thought into that, because it's all about, like you said, visibility, and it has to be eye catching, and it has to resonate with patients.
100%. And there is a big misconception.
This holiday season, give the gift that keeps on giving. New scrubs. Whether you're treating yourself or someone special, Figs has everything you need to look and feel great while working hard. Head to the link in our show notes and use my referral code for 20% off your next order. Treat yourself or someone you love with Figs this holiday season.
I always bring up when having this conversation is that a lot of your colleagues think that you should launch your website the day you open your practice. And that couldn't be more wrong, because then they come back to me and they're like, Alan, where's my patients? And I said, well, you should have gotten in touch with a marketing company 6 months ago and probably started slowly launching things 3 months in advance, so that your material can be recognized on the web and people can pre-book their appointment at your office before you open.
Now, my next question to you is, for a dentist with like a limited budget, because all of this we talked about costs money, and then you allocate money here, you might have less money for this. If you had a limited budget, how do you help them prioritize what to invest in first, and where they can afford to hold off?
Sure. Look, I want to say that there's always a way. Okay, not everybody needs 10 operatories of an office for their startup. Actually, I will personally limit my startups anywhere between 4 to 6 operatories. 5 to 6, in my opinion, is the sweet spot. But I also will never recommend equipping more than 3 from day one. So you can build out an office for 6 chairs, but I will only install 2 to 3 from day one. 2 is my sweet spot. If you have a partner, we'll do 3. And if you want a hygienist from day one, which I also don't ever recommend, then you would also do 3 chairs. But
why is that?
Because if you're a single practitioner working without a hygienist, you only really need your 1 chair from day one, and then your spillover. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just, to have more than that from day one, you just have a chair collecting dust and wasting warranty, right? And it really only takes me roughly 6 weeks to order a chair and install it in your office. So there's more than enough time to plan for us to purchase that and put it in your office when you actually need it. We just discussed having an appropriate budget for marketing. You could hold off on that 1 chair, get all those new patients, and put it in later. There's also quite a few different tiers of equipment that you can get for your office as far as price. There's also quite a few tiers when it comes to architects and contractors and other services for your office. So there's always a way to budget appropriately for your type of office. I don't think that there's any specific cookie cutter approach, like you have to get Belmont or ADAC or use this contractor. It's going to be different for everybody.
You mentioned holding off on having a hygienist when you first opened. Why did you say that?
I think that it's just for a number of reasons, but it's an expense. Okay, I see it across the board now that a lot of hygienists are asking for around $70 an hour to work in your office. Overhead is incredibly expensive for practice owners, especially startups. So some will even have a multidisciplined assistant to work the front desk and be your assistant for the day. Some dentists will actually just install what's called like a dry shield, which is a isolation device that props the mouth open and does suction in lieu of an assistant. So that person can be working the front desk. You might even have a virtual assistant, which is becoming more and more popular, that you can pay, $13 an hour versus 20 plus to help save money with your startup. So, I would say 1 out of 100 practices that I'll build will start with a hygienist from day one.
I see. That's an interesting point. I would assume that you would bring in the hygienist to help build efficiency in your productivity, but I can see it being an added expense for sure.
Totally.
So you've seen many types of offices, many different types of practices. What separates a practice that thrives from one that hits a plateau?
Sure. Look, I do work with every specialty. So this question might range across the board, but if we're talking general dentist, it's so funny. I see those dentists who go to the COIS Education Center, all these extra CE education events. Ironically, those are the ones that, not even surprisingly, those are the ones that I see succeeding the most. They're the most well-rounded dentists, what I would classify as super GPs, those doing all different types of dentistry and not necessarily referring out as much work. Those are the ones that I see succeeding the most. Yeah.
That's amazing to hear. I'm curious to know, have you ever seen a practice fail, or does a practice ever fail?
So I don't mean to laugh at all. I never want anyone to fail. My goal, again, is to live vicariously through them and their success so I succeed. So if a practice ever does fail, I would feel it myself. But the great thing to know is that less than 0.5%, the statistic is less than 0.5% of dental practices fail. So that is a great statistic. It's very positive. Personally, I've never had a practice of mine fail, but I also don't want to say that it's because of my doing that has been the case. I think that I bode well with other entrepreneurs, and it just so happens that those who seek me out could be, very successful business owners.
No, I'm glad I asked that, because I know a lot of associates who are looking to take that next step, but there's that fear of starting a practice. What if it fails? Oh, it's a huge financial responsibility. And to hear that statistics, it's very empowering, and it's very positive, like you said. So I'm sure that's a relief for a lot of listeners.
Absolutely. And, I'd be lying if I said every single person that reaches out to me is like, Alan, I'm scared. Don't worry. It's normal. Like, I wish, if I didn't have to keep every single startup a secret, which is another interesting point to make. But if I didn't have to keep every startup a secret, I would record every single reaction that everybody's scared. And anyone who opens any type of business should have that anxiety, because it will just drive you to be more successful. You have to be scared to want it more. But, an interesting point to make, and I have to say this, is that I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't hold every startup a secret. Okay. Most everyone who is doing a startup, starting any type of practice or doing an acquisition is generally employed. Okay. Actually, the bank will require you to have an associateship to do a startup. Okay.
Really?
So, yep. And I don't want anyone to think, well, gosh, I have no money coming in. I'm doing a startup. You're only going to work, 1 to 2 to 3 days a week generally as you build your startup and then add days as it goes on. So, but I do have this vow, unfortunately for me, there's awkward situations where associates of practices that I work with will reach out and please say, don't tell so-and-so. I've actually, signed NDAs so that I feel more comfortable with the situation. But it's always an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a misunderstanding that most dentists have. It's like you're not going to go into practice or open up your practice from day one and be fully productive. Like you are going to take days one by one where you're working in your practice, but also working at an existing office as an associate until you build that patient population.
Totally. And you won't, you may not necessarily be profitable your first year always. You could take a loss your first year. And while I personally believe that offices starting up these days should be taking insurances because you'll just grow that much faster, there are dentists, and especially in different markets, who will open out-of-network fee-for-service, and it might take them longer to grow. And that's normal. I'd also say that as a fee-for-service practice, you should be spending that much more on marketing because you don't have the insurances bringing you patients. So there's like I said, there's no cookie cutter way about this approach. And we do our best to cater to each startup individually.
A lot of dentists are scared to sign up with insurance because they think it'll bog them down in the future and they can't change the type of practice that they are later down the road. Is that a concern?
I'd say there's also a misconception with that. I have seen plenty of practices that have made themselves incredibly successful over the years. And in time, they'll actually wean themselves off of insurances, maybe then cut their days down to 2 to 3 offices, right? The dream for some might be to work never and just be a practice owner and have their associates work for them. But there are 100% models where you yourself could say be fee for service, and then your associates are in network with insurances to still capture those patients and give them enough work.
Okay. Now, we said that there's a lot of misunderstandings. What do dentists misunderstand about the business side of running a practice? And how do you help them bridge that gap?
Well, I guess a misconception could definitely be, it's definitely not easy. Okay. I don't know anyone that has ever said that it's easy or running a practice or business in general could ever be easy. But, I sometimes try to deter graduates from doing a startup from day one. I say that they should absolutely go work in that Medicaid office, in that fee-for-service or in-network office to get a good variety and a taste for what's out there, but also to gain experience, not just with clinically doing work, but also just having conversations with patients and selling treatment. That doesn't come overnight or through dental school. I might hate myself for saying it, but at the end of the day, there aren't really business courses in dental school, right? So from what I've been told from your colleagues is that, dental school will say, you put up an awning and put your name on it and patients will come, or work as an associate and transition into ownership at that practice one day. I mean, those days are, I don't want to say they're done, but they're few and far between. So you really have to be creative as a new business owner in making yourself successful. I will say that it is not for everybody. So quick story. I actually was just at an event last night, ironically. I met up with a super nice guy, 38 years old. He said, you know what, Alan, I've been thinking about doing a startup. I've also been thinking against it. He's like, I'm making, like $500,000 a year in my associateship. I'm producing like $2 million for the practice. I'm doing well. Why do I want to take on the burden of ownership? I said, you may not want to. Maybe it's not for you. But are you the entrepreneur that doesn't, love living under somebody day after day? You have to decide that. I will never sell someone on doing a startup. I'll just give them the tools and let them make the decision. If they decide to move forward, I'm 100% in with you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It's not for everyone. And there's no shame in not being a practice owner. I was having that conversation with Craig Spodak. I don't know if you know of him, but
yeah.
He's a proof dentist. And we had this very candid conversation around that topic because the ultimate way or the holy grail of dentistry is like, oh, to be that successful dentist, you should be a practice owner. But this guy's making good money, like you said, this story you just told. And if that's good enough for him and he's able to invest his time into other things as he wants, then why not stay an associate? I mean, it really depends on the person. There's no real way of doing it,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know Dr. Melanie, who you interviewed as well. She made a great point. Like, don't let dentistry just take over your life. Like, you have to be yourself as well and have time to do the things that you want to do. I mean, I have some people who have reached out in the past and said that they wanted to do a startup and then, happened to be a female dentist and they got pregnant. Kind of put a cog in her plans. And she's like, maybe we'll come back to this in a year. And you know what happened? She had a second kid. And so, but I also have doctors who have had 3 kids and come to me and say, now I'm ready to do a startup. So everyone's situation is going to be different. Again, I can't stress enough. There is not one way to do this, and everyone's different.
Right. Through your work, you've also created as you mentioned earlier, the FYI Study Club, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is like a community around learning. So I'm curious to know what topics are dentists most curious about or clueless about?
Sure. Look, a lot of it's just creating awareness because there's a lot of things business related that dentists aren't familiar with. So my favorite is outside of my study club, but just something to note. My favorite is the dentist who's built one office and all of a sudden thinks they're a consultant. So, they want to introduce you to everyone that they used because it worked out for them, and that's fine. I think that you should, take little tidbits from everybody and see what makes sense to you. But, the beauty of working with someone like me is I've done it hundreds of times. So, topics that dentists are most interested in. Look, these days my study clubs are more focused on making an office more productive. I had a very successful study club this past year with Curodont and Perio Restore. Both incredible products that can bring all types of new revenue to your practice in hygiene alone. Okay. Right. Let's take varnish and sealants and whitening aside. Curodont says that they can rebuild enamel and rebuild decay. I mean, that's great for a patient and it makes you more money. Perio Restore helps with gum disease, bloody gums. I used it myself. Okay, it worked wonders. My good friend actually did 20 veneers on me. Okay, I used Perio Restore. 2 weeks later, he's like, "What did you do to your gums to heal them so fast?" So, just bringing these unique products to dentists who maybe there isn't a rep on the field representing those products, bringing that knowledge in front of a group. There was so many questions after the event and doctors who reached out after the fact to bring these products into their office. They're thanking me, and you know what? They're buying the product from me too, so we both win.
Yeah, and I have to say, Curodont is a new product in the market. I mean, it's based in, their founders are in Europe. It's a European product by its nature. And It's unbelievable what you can do with it. And it's all about prevention, right? And I'm sure any patient would be happy to take on prevention versus, getting treatment done after the fact. And if you're a fee-for-service office, well, great. It's a great add-on. And now they actually have an insurance code for it. So you can also bill insurance. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yep. So stuff like that, I think that dentists are really, they're hungry for information like that. And one thing I'll admit is that I do not help with building systems in a practice. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like morning huddles, billing out insurances. I do know quite a lot about insurances and tips and tricks for that, mm-hmm. but I'm not paid to be consulting these things. And personally, I think a bit of a liability. So by saving that $75,000, $50,000 to $75,000 by working with me, now you can afford to bring on a consultant of types to help you do those things for a much, much, much lesser cost. Right. So if you feel a little detached from the day to day and, oh man, what am I going to do from a business standpoint? Now you can afford to bring someone in and, hey, you know what? I have a few people for that.
Yeah. My last question to you is going to be, have you seen any major shifts in what patients are expecting from dental offices today?
Oh man, so that is a great question. I always want to tell my dentists to be innovative in their approach to dentistry. Okay, let's put it this way: I was successful as a rep because I gave dentists something else that their current rep wasn't giving them. Back in the day, I actually became CPR trainer certified and was training my offices because I knew it was something they had to get done every 2 years. As a dentist, let's, provide the little gold things under their eyes, give them the spa-like treatment, make the check-in process super easy and friendly, as well as the checkout with the personalized follow-up for the office. I mean, let's be different and unique and make patients talk about you at their Pilates or yoga or what, if they're getting a haircut, that's all they're talking about is that cool scanner that they had that scanned their teeth instead of the goop to give them a crown. So, I try to tell everyone to be different, have extended hours, work hours that other people aren't, and that will help you, get the patients that someone else isn't.
Alan, you've been such a great resource. If someone wanted to connect with you and get in touch with you, where can they find you?
They can reach out to me on Instagram at all spelled out New York Dental Consultant, or feel free to shoot me a text on my cell, 262-389-0532. And Ellie, thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
It's been a total pleasure. Thank you. So that's the end of our episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please follow, subscribe, write a review, share it with your friends so that I know that I'm not just talking into the abyss, that the content is what you need to hear. It hits where it needs to hit and you feel empowered. So doing all those things tells me that and makes all of this worthwhile. I hope to see you at the next episode. Cheers.